So welcome everyone to the Changemaker Institute Social Impact Live event. Today we are talking about being financially sustainable as a social enterprise. So a little bit about our mission. If you were here at the last event, I talked a bit about what I hope to do with the Changemaker Institute. As some of you knew, I founded this very recently. But really, what I hope to do is bridge academic research in law, ethics, business, with the business world to give businesses the tools and the mechanisms to think of themselves as being agents for change and to create social impact. And we want to also empower businesses with the tools they need to be socially and environmentally impactful, which includes providing you with processes, connections, the network, and also um, potentially funding. And I know that takes a lot more work, and it's going. I'm working on it, and that will roll out eventually. But I hope to also be able to offer funding to all these really great businesses that want to do impact work but don't have the funds to implement some of their plans. And also ultimately, I want to bring together a community of academics, investors, funders, philanthropists, and social entrepreneurs together who are committed to social impact and to get us thinking about, basically how can we make the world a better place through businesses. So that's the Changemaker Institute. And for the summer, I have planned every second Monday or every two weeks in between a series of events where we will discuss things that are important to social enterprises. So in the last event, we talked about what social impact means. And today we're going to talk about what being financially sustainable means. The second component or the second key to being a successful social enterprise. 2 Mondays from today, we're going to talk about diversity, equity, and inclusion and getting real about that. So there is so much discussion about diversity, equity, and inclusion. And I, myself, with some colleagues, they may be on the call right now. I'm not sure. I can only see the slides, but we've been working with Catalyst 2030 to develop a template that members of Catalyst 2030 is the organization that is trying to make sure that the sustainable development goals are implemented by 2030. So one of the projects that they're working on, and I'm part of that project, is thinking about what diversity, equity, and inclusion looks like. So we've drafted a template, that people can use and put up on their website. But we really need to engage in and think about what diversity, equity, and inclusion actually means. It's got to be more than just a template. And I have a good friend. I'm not sure if Gary, you're here now. But Gary is the author of Unjustified. Where have our Black leaders gone? And he is coming to be and being a part of that discussion next Monday. Sorry, 2 Mondays from today. So that's what we're going to be doing on July the 12th. On July the 26th, we're going to be talking about raising funds for social impact. I have a good friend, Yuri Van Renberg, who is actually he's South African, but based in England. And he has raised funds for 3 mission-based projects in Malawi. So he's going to come and talk with us there. Barbara, who was a venture capitalist before and very involved in funding for impact-based organizations through a foundation that she was a part of in California. Hopefully she can come and join us as well. And then on August 9th, because of my background in intellectual property, I'm going to do a one event on thinking about intellectual property as a revenue generating strategy. So how can social enterprises think of intellectual property, patents, copyright, trademarks, trade secrets, know-how, technical know-how as potentially a revenue generating asset. So that's August 9th. And then August 23rd, we're going to try to wrap everything up and talk about building a successful social enterprise and being able to roll that out. So that's the events that I've planned for the summer through the Changemaker Institute. And for today, this is what we're going to talk about. Number one, the what. What does being financially sustainable look like? Number two, the revenue streams, right? What kind of revenue streams can you think about when you think about being financially sustainable? And the third one, I want to make sure that I cut my conversation, the presentation to less than 30 minutes, because I really want to engage all of you with this question, right? How does this conversation apply to me and my business? And there's something really interesting, something really exciting about this conversation. This today is because I have a former student, Rebecca Rounds, who has so generously agreed to sponsor a $25 Amazon gift card for the best answer. And so she, like Ryan, was supposed to be here today, but she got called to a meeting at the very last minute. And she just sent me a message, so she cannot be here. And she was going to choose the best answer to give the gift card to. So since she's not here and since Ryan's not here, I'll choose the best answer. But I want you guys to start thinking early on about some of the comments of the presentation and get you thinking about how does this apply to me, right? Okay, so let's start. Now, if you notice, I was very careful about using the word sustainable and kind of avoiding the word profitable. And the reason why I chose the word being financially sustainable is because when we talk about profitability, every business's primary concern is really profitability, right? How do we be as profitable as we can? And we know that model or that mindset has resulted in a lot of inequities and a lot of problems that we see in society today, right? So when we talk about profitability, you want to increase the surplus from the sales of goods and services while minimizing costs, right? And through that, what we hope or what businesses hope is to maximize shareholder value, right? So when we limit the cost, right, and we try to deduct or we try to spend as little as we can to make our profit margins as large as it can be, right? There are problems that will result, right? Which is why, some companies are okay with having children, in Bangladesh produce clothes for their company, because it's a lot cheaper, right? But and that's a whole set of social problems that results from that model. So I've been very careful about avoiding the word profitability and talking about being sustainable, right? What do we mean about being sustainable? And being sustainable really means we need to identify a reliable source of recurring revenue to cover our expenses and achieve our financial goals that are consistent with the mission of your social enterprise, right? So we want money, we want income coming in, but we want to make sure that we are not cutting costs at all costs, at every level, so that we become as profitable as we can, right? We want to make sure that there's enough money coming in to support our organization, a business, but at the same time being really mindful about the different stakeholders, right? So the stakeholders isn't just the shareholders, right? The stakeholders will also include the society that you're a part of, right? The part of society that you're part of, your employees, right? People that are your distributors, right? Your vendors. Those are all your stakeholders that you need to think about. You need to align your financial goals with your stakeholders and not just your shareholders, right? And so to be really clear, I'm not saying that we cannot think about profitability, and I think actually we should think about being profitable. And there's a saying that if you are profitable and you're rich and you do impact work, then it's great. You're kind of eccentric, like Elon Musk, right? But if you're doing impact work and not really being profitable and not bringing money in, then you are just, this crazy person with a really expensive hobby, right? So we want to be profitable, um, but not at the cost of the different interests that form your social enterprises ecosystem, right? So that's what I mean by being sustainable. Right, so let's talk about, if we're talking about being financially sustainable, what are your revenue streams, right? So to be financially sustainable, we need to know exactly where income is coming from, right? Who is giving us money, right, to run our social enterprise, right? And that question is going to be a little bit different whether you are a nonprofit organization or whether you've structured yourself as a social enterprise. So I know I looked at the people who are coming to the event, and I realized that there are some people who are doing nonprofit work, and there's some people who are structured more like social enterprises. So I'm going to address both, right? So I found the American Red Cross, right, and I looked at where they were getting their income from, right? So the American Red Cross has the mission of preventing and alleviating human suffering in the face of emergencies by mobilizing the power of volunteers and the generosity of donors, right? So that's their mission. So if you look at the column on their left, right, they actually rely on a lot of grants and donations, and fundraising campaigns to run their enterprise, right? So the total contributions from just broad grants and gifts and fundraising events and government grants is 817 million and something, right? But they are also engaged in revenue generating businesses. So like the blood that they collect from you, the plasma that they collect from you, that's actually sold to hospitals, right? So the program, service, revenue, all that, right? The training programs that they provide to people who are interested in emergency relief, those kind of things, all that total actually $1.8 billion. So that's a huge sum, right? So if you're thinking about, if you're running a nonprofit and you are thinking about donors, donations, that's one source of revenue, but you can also actually also engage in revenue generating activities provided, right? And that's the huge caveat. The revenue generating activities has to be tied back to your mission, right? To qualify for tax exemption. Otherwise, then if your revenue generating activities has deviated from your core mission, then you could be taxed on those things, right? But if you look at the revenue stream, right, they actually make, and this was from you can look up the income. I have the site here, right? But I think this was 2019, right? Yeah, 2019. Look at the left, the purple column, right? It was the financial year in 2019. They actually had $2 billion in revenue, right? And on the right column, you actually see a breakdown of their donations, the contributions that's not part of their um, uh, where they're actually selling program related services, right? But a large sum of their funding comes from, or the contribution, right, comes from the public in terms of contribution, gifts, and grants, which is really interesting, right? So that's one model, right? If you have like a nonprofit or a foundation, right, that's where your income is going to be coming from. Now, if we compare that with your quintessential social enterprise, Patagonia really has only one source of income, right? The sale of their clothes. They're not going out and and sourcing for donations or public contributions or running fundraising events, right? They are 100% in the business of selling clothes, right? Apparels. But they have a very specific social or environmental mission, right? They are known as the environmental activists in business. And the way they have structured the business is to tie in their social mission and in their environmental mission with the actual business, right? So this is what you would call the hybrid model, the social enterprise, right? And some of their mission statements, again, you can actually follow this link here, right? And you can actually download the PDF where I got all this information from, right? But they have several mission statements, right? They want to build the best product with no unnecessary harm. So they're really careful about where they source for the materials. They want to conduct operations without causing unnecessary harm. They want to provide a supportive working environment. And every 1% of their revenue, not profits, their revenue goes towards supporting the environment, protecting the environment. And they do that in the form of giving donations or participating in environmental activism, right? And the interesting thing about Patagonia is that their revenue, they are actually charging a lot higher than most retail, right? But they're actually bringing in a profit, right? So their revenue advantage over the competitors, their gross margin, profit margin is actually 50 to 55% of their sales, which is pretty good, because if you can get a 20% profit margin, that's already very good. But theirs is a 50 to 55% profit margin. And the question is, how do they get such a high profit margin, right? So they are actually charging 20% higher than other outdoor apparel competitors, right? So like the North Face, another really popular brand, Patagonia is actually 20% higher. And their retail prices is actually 50% higher than mass market competitors like Target and all that, right? So how do they have such high margins, right? And that's the question. That's the really interesting thing about Patagonia, is that they can charge high and yet people still buy their products, right? And they are profitable. And the reason why they can acquire such high margins is because they really understand who their customers are and what their customers want, and they give that to them, right? So they produce multifunctional clothing, right? You can wear the clothing indoor, and then when you go outdoors, you can pull up an additional layer, right? So as a result of that, people buy less clothing, right? They just need to invest in Patagonia, and then they can use Patagonia in many different situations, right? The quality is much better, so it's long lasting, and therefore you buy less often. And they have all kinds of after purchase programs, where if you buy it and then you want to recycle it, it's easy to send it back to them to recycle, right? So the disposal of the product is also taken care of. So you are basically, as the customer, taken care of from the time you buy the product to the time you dispose of the product. And this is the really interesting thing. Their gross margins are so high because they actually spend a lot less on marketing. So it's interesting that they spend 1% of their revenue on marketing, right? Whereas Nike actually spends 3 million on just getting demand, right? Creating demand for their products. And Apple spends 1.2 million on advertising. And the reason why Patagonia spends so little is because there's so much attention that they attract because of their environmental work, right? So the mission itself, right, kind of fuels the demand for their product, right? So those are two different models: the Red Cross, American Red Cross, and Patagonia, right? And if we are going to think about, as a social enterprise, about generating revenue in an effective way, right, we really need to ask this question and know the answer, right? What am I selling, and what are people paying me for? So when we talk about selling, right? So this is kind of my definition, right, of sales, right? Is that it should be an offer of a solution to a problem or an opportunity based on empathy, right? Really understanding the people that are coming into your universe, right? So people pay you for the product or service that you offer. So Patagonia, a really good outdoor apparel, right? But if you are in the business of social enterprise, social impact, you also need to know that not only are you selling a product or a service, right? You're also offering or selling a solution to a social or environmental problem, and that's the social impact that you want people to buy, right? So the American Red Cross isn't just selling, um, you know, blood or plasma or training programs, right? They're also selling a social impact mission that they are going to alleviate human suffering by, by getting the public to actually buy that, right? So if an individual is not going to be able to solve, human suffering, but the Red Cross can, right? And if they can sell the public on that idea, then that's where they get the donations and the contributions, right? Same thing with Patagonia, right? Not only are they selling clothes, if they can sell people the idea that they are actually contributing to a better environment, right? That's how they get to charge those extra the higher prices, right? To increase their profit margin. So so the question is, what are you selling, right? And if you can convince your funders or your contributors or people who are going to make donations to your cause, that not only are you selling a product, but you're also selling a solution to a problem that they care about, right? That's when you get the revenue stream. And of course that has to be, tied to really understanding what your customers want, right? But that's it, right? What am I selling, right? And what are people paying me for, right? So it's not just a consultation, right? There has to be something else to that you're selling them, right? That impact, right? So if you're consulting on diversity, equity, and inclusion, right? You're not only selling the consultation, you're selling a more equitable workspace, right? And if you can convince them, not just of the first one, but of the second one, right? That you're selling a more equitable workspace, that's when you get that business, right? So that's what I want you to think about. What am I selling and what are people paying me for, right? Um, and so the last slide that I have before I want to open this up to discussion is to think about this, right? Some what are the rev or what are the different types of revenue stream that you could identify that will help your social enterprise, right? So I've listed different revenue streams here, right? But number one, obviously you can sell products or services, right? And products or services can be anything like Patagonia, like apparels, right? Or, you know, things that hospitals need, right? Like the Cross, right? Hospitals need, and research companies, they need blood, right, to run tests. So that's what the Red Cross sells, right? Or you could be selling books, right? But whatever it is, one of the primary source of income for a social enterprise would be product and or services. The second thing is knowledge, right? What can you offer someone else that they would be willing to pay you for, right? What can you consult in? Can you train them? Can you educate them, right? There's a lot of, I guess, opportunities that have opened up for people who are doing diversity, equity, and inclusion work, within the past 2 or 3 years, right? And especially within the last year, right? So consulting or training is something that can be a really good source of revenue for a social enterprise. The third thing is, can you empower people, right? If you can empower people, right, that can be a source of income for you, right? So microloans are a great example, right? The Grameen Bank example, right? Muhammad Yunus, and the idea that if you can loan a poor person $2,000 to start up a business, right? Then if you can charge a small interest on that loan, that's income, right? Or can you teach business development? Can you provide technical assistance? Can you provide an opportunity to network, right? So that's another another source of revenue. The fourth one that I think hasn't been explored enough is whether you can form strategic alliances with different people in the social impact space, right? And do potentially revenue sharing, right? So what 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 kind of partnership can you form with people, right? And share the revenue that comes in. Maybe somebody else has an asset that you don't, right? Or maybe they have access to a market that you don't, right? But then you have a product that they want, right? Can you form a strategic alliance together so that you have access to their market, right? And then they can have access to your product, right? And then you can revenue share. Those are things that I think if we have more opportunity to discuss the assets that each social enterprise brings to the table, number four can be a really powerful way of building revenue stream. Number five is leasing and real property programs, right? So do you have real property that has space that somebody else may want to use to initiate a social impact program, right? So there's a lot of office space, or at least this was my thinking last year, right? There was a lot of office space that opened up because of COVID when everyone started working at home, right? Now I guess more and more people are coming back and working in that space, but if there are office spaces that are empty because people are working at home more, those office space can be rented out for other kind of social impact programs, right? And that's one way to look at it, right? So number six, community membership and masterminds, right? Can you offer a community that people would be willing to pay for? Number seven, events, conferences, and summits. It if you can actually run a really good social impact summit, right? Or any kind of conference or summit specific to an area that you're really good and knowledgeable about, and people will pay for. So I actually attended an event that was run by Ashoka. It was really well organized. Um, and you would think, Ashoka is all about social impact, but they were actually charging for admission to their conference, and I think it was like 280 or so dollars to attend. So it was, and there were a lot of people who attended the conference, right? So that's another way of thinking about a revenue stream. And the last thing that I wanted to mention briefly here and go into more detail for the event that we've planned for August the 9th is just to think about intellectual property as potentially generating revenue through licensing, right? So you want to develop intellectual property that makes it cheaper for people to go to you to get a license than it would be for them to invent or create around you. That means avoid your IP and create something new. You want to come up with something really good, right? So that when you put it out in the market, people would rather license your product than go to the trouble of creating something new, right? And we can talk more about that at the event at the event that's planned for August 9th. But between now and then, we can start thinking. You can start thinking about what kind of intellectual property can you create, and this would apply to copyright, patents, um, know-how that you can develop that people would be willing to pay you for, right? So those are the revenue streams that I think would be valuable to a social enterprise. And with that, I want to open up the room to conversation and to hear your stories and your thoughts, and also, right, so that we get the Amazon gift card from Rebecca out to you. Um, how does this apply to you, right? in the conversation. So I'm going to stop sharing my screen and then open and so that I can see everyone, and open this up to discussion. Okay. All right. So stop sharing, and I'm going to do a gallery view where I can see everyone. All right. Barbara.
Yeah, I'm reliable to talk, huh? That's right. You know, it's interesting. This is a little different than our last conversation, and I actually found it really, it stimulated a lot of thoughts. And the organization that stimulated the most thoughts about is someone who I think is on our call here, who's Leanne. I don't know, Leanne, are you here today?
Yeah.
I am.
Okay. I don't know about
I'm
whether
not on
you
video.
got...
I guess I could be, but I wasn't really planning to be, but
well,
I
I'll
can
kick it off. I won't put you completely on the spot, you know, until, and you don't have to say more, but I can't talk about you without acknowledging you being here. And one of the interesting ideas, you know, we were having a conversation at a board meeting recently about, you know, about this, and I think every organization does. And one of the interesting things, just in a nutshell, the organization focuses on increasing diversity of STEM graduates and economic development of, you know, low-income populations through that. But really, employers, what got me going, employers are dying to hire diverse STEM talent. I mean, it isn't something you have to convince employers that they want to do, but that doesn't mean it's easy. And it doesn't mean that, you know, they intelligently take every opportunity they can to do that. And so this idea of somehow, you know, thinking of how you generate revenue from employers, because you are definitely solving a problem by providing them with highly qualified STEM college graduates, which is what this program does, is extremely interesting. And so for like goofy idea list are things like, well, you could just charge them like a search fee, but that's kind of, if they wanted to do that, they would have done that already. So forget that. But you could give them recognition. I mean, they could get awards for the number of graduates number of interns they hire, the number of graduates they hire, the number and you know, the number they promote. I mean, there are things that you could do that would give them recognition that they might want to be able to support the organization to get that continued recognition. And or the graduates themselves do become, I mean, they become highly paid employees, most of these people over time. And we do have a pay it forward mentality, and Leanne has done an amazing job of that, but we haven't formalized that. I mean, can you formalize the expectations that graduates will donate, you know, some sort of commitment? You know, obviously it's not going to be a legally binding commitment, but something that formalizes something that we have been doing successfully, but informally, and maybe make that more of a source of revenue. So those are just a couple of goofy ideas that came to mind, Leanne. I don't know if you have any, if you think I'm off base, or you have probably have better ones. Leanne's our CEO.
Would welcome suggestions from people. I mean, the one thing I wanted to add, and thank you so much, Barbara, and appreciate the invitation. Barbara invited me to attend this, but the thing is, the students we're supporting are students attending California State University system, like Cal State Dominguez Hills. So it's not the USC, the Stanford, the Berkeley students, and it's trying to get companies to really not only talk about diversity, equity, and inclusion, but actually act upon diversity, equity, and inclusion, and have a broader base of talent than just the elite schools, which are amazing, right? The USC, Stanford, and Berkeley's, but not all of the diverse students, especially the Black and Latinx students, attend those campuses. So trying to really think about how we can have a sustainable revenue model. I mean, I really looked at, you know, your chart on like the American Red Cross and seeing kind of the grants and contributions, but then also seeing like the program revenue stream. And that's what we've thought about and talked a little bit about, can we really leverage the information we know from our students into kind of a thought leadership series, and really helping them to train companies on, or, offer these seminars on how do you retain diverse talent. It's one thing even to attract diverse talent and have young people come in at the entry level, but how do you retain and get them to the middle level, right? And then ultimately to the executive level. So would really welcome any ideas around all of that.
Mm. Yeah. Hi, Leanne. I'm Kathy. How are you?
Hi.
I actually consult with Valley College, the community college in San Bernardino that feeds into CSU San Bernardino, and I've been working with them on helping their students who are more in the visual arts and graphic arts to actually start accessing some things like that, which is really interesting that you talk about that. But I also come from like an architecture background and just went through like the well certification process. And I don't think there's any real certification process for companies that are hiring diverse populations of students or have a more diverse workforce. I mean, it just sort of made me think about like, what if there was like companies who could brand themselves like the same way that we brand buildings for livable cities in that way? Like I'll work with you on that. So I'd be happy to. But yeah, I actually teach at Texas State University, which is historically a Hispanic serving institution as well. And I've been working in K-12, helping teachers and students leverage things like the design thinking process in STEM and STEAM. So I've been doing that for about 8 or 9 years with my side hustle, which is Creative Builder. And so, yeah, there's a lot. I think I look at sort of how USGBC and the Well Building Institute have done this for buildings and spaces. I don't think there's anything around employers for doing something like that. Like that could be a really interesting evolution.
I have a question for Katie, Barbara, and Leanne. Do you know of any companies that have, so like Patagonia, they brand themselves as this environmental company, and that's how they attract people who have the same interest, right?
Right.
So
yeah.
do you know of any company who has held themselves out as, okay, we are a 100% diverse company? And the company that I'm thinking of, I'm not sure how their operations were, whether they were truly diverse or not, but Benetton, UCB at one point, every ad that they had different people of different colors, right? So I was wondering if we know of any contemporary company that we can highlight that's a good model, that so the revenue may not come directly from like consultation or offering training, but it could be from people who would buy their product because they are known to be a diverse company. Does that make sense?
I mean, I'm thinking more. It's more like in some of the media. Like I think of like Bet TV out of Atlanta or something like that, where it's specifically founded and run by people of color. Right. I mean, that seems to be kind of where that space happens. Even in like tech. I mean, it's still a white boys club in tech. I mean,
but I think it hasn't UPS branded itself that way. I think that they've done an enormous job of making their board and management and, because they did already have a diverse workforce, but they've been able to say, or we promoted but I think the point is a really good one. Just this whole idea of certifying your customers, so to speak, somehow having, if they validating they want to be known that way, and getting them to say they want to be known that way, and then helping them do it might be really interesting.
Yeah.
If I can interject.
Oh, sorry, Richard. Go ahead.
I'm sorry. I loved it. I'm literally giving away a trade secret here, but we're in this together. When I say this, there's 2 problems with certification. What's your standard? Number 1, what standard are you going to use? They're trying that with the ESG. but there's 7 companies measuring ESG, and each one is measuring it differently.
Right.
So you'd have to offer them a standard of what they're going to measure themselves off of. If you look at Facebook, Facebook bragged that they spent $117 million over 10 years, and they went from 13 to 13.2% people of color.
Right.
And they're breaking their arm, patting themselves on the back. University of Michigan has 21 diversity officers, all paid over $100,000. But what are they doing? Has anybody's life changed because those 21 people are in there? And certification is huge, and I can't recommend it enough, because that's what we do. We literally we work with the system that we have, or we help them implement a system where they can come out with, make systemic changes, and then come out at the end with measurable numbers, not latent numbers.
Right.
Real numbers at the end where they can show they made a difference, and this amount of money had this kind of difference. If you can do the same thing, if you can offer that service where you're not just checking the box of we hired this many LGBTQ employees, that's great. Has anything changed in your company other than the number? If you can approach them that way, everyone loves diversity. Diversity is being invited to the dance. Equity is everybody dancing. And everybody forgets that equity thing of how many people are actually out there dancing on the floor. Are they having fun? Are they having a good time? I encourage everyone to do that. Tell people, have you forgotten the E in the DEI aspect of it? There's people need that guidance. Everyone just wants to check the box.
Yeah.
Are you making any difference in anyone's life?
I agree. I mean, that's the thing. Like for us, we were just recognized by Los Angeles Business Journal as Diversity, Inclusion Plus Equity Nonprofit of the Year. So to your point in terms of equity, right? And our students, again, we're taking low income first generation college students and helping them to earn middle class salary for the first job, right? 71,000 on average, versus there are a lot of organizations out there, saying they're helping students, but they're helping them to get $15 an hour, like that's 30,000 a year. Not to say there isn't a certain population of students where that's very meaningful, but for our students who are, want to earn that bachelor's degree and to really change in terms of intergenerational and, the whole racial wealth gap and everything, people have to not be forgetting that there's a whole population of students here that we can support. But it's how do you get that word out and get the brand when you're helping students, where even every day, and I don't know your whole audience if they tend to be in the greater Los Angeles area or broader, but every day, like LA Times, they tout everything USC and UCLA are doing, but you hardly ever see a story about the CSU, for example, right? So it's like trying to get our organization, which is called STEM Advantage, known, and on the radar screen. Boy, definitely welcome ideas. I'm going to put my email in the chat, and definitely welcome. People want to reach out and brainstorm or share ideas, because all in for smart people with smart ideas wanting to kind of think through how we do this better.
Yeah.
So you can see why I'm so motivated with someone like Leanne leading this organization. So it's a really good.
Yeah, it's such an important conversation as well, because I think there are a lot of intending companies that are committed to DEI, but they don't know how to go about rolling it out. So like even with Catalyst, we drafted like a DEI template that we are encouraging companies to put on their website, but that's just a statement, right? And the question is really how do we and I like Richard's thing about equity, right? How do we bring people in and get them engaged? And so I think it's a question that law schools themselves try to deal with all the time, or universities, right? How do we get more historically marginalized group into the university? And then the next question is, once they get into the university, how do we get them in the, the law review board and the moot courts, right? And the I guess the high powered, or the high, the positions that would open up new doors for them, right? So that's the question. And I like the point about getting them into the organization isn't enough, right? How do we get them up the ranks to be leaders as well? And I was reading can't remember where I was reading, but the C-suite are essentially still like an unbreakable. There is still an unbreakable ceiling, not in terms of just women. Well, the women barriers has broken down quite a bit, but in terms of rate of race, right? Yeah.
And we are seeing some companies, I think, at the C-suite, they'll have a diverse, maybe C-suite a little bit more than in the past. But what they're doing is they're taking somebody, for example, an accomplished Black woman executive from Starbucks, and then she's going to another company, and then she'll go to another company. Or I mean, it's kind of like it's people, the same group of people or the same names, I think, moving around to these like top tier companies is what I'm seeing, at least. You know, I'm not seeing a lot of new players in it. Not to say that I can spend all my time looking at all these, but I mean, that's my observation is it's a lot of very talented people, but they're moving from Google to Starbucks to, you know, another company. It's not opening the door for others. And I think therefore that whole middle tier seems not to be getting as much focus.
I wonder whether we could come up with a way to create like kind of like a mentorship program where these top people have some kind of incentive to stay with the organization and mentor the young ones that are coming up. I think if we can convince people of the need to mentor younger ones and help them move up the ranks would be a good way, you know, to make sure that that ceiling is opened, right?
In the end, the company has to want to, number one. Right. The company has to want to, because it's so easy to check the box. We've increased this representation for this group by 0.3%. Good for you. But they have to make a systemic change. And that's what everyone forgets. The question, ask questions, and I actually was thinking about this. How many inclusive systems and processes have you designed or implemented? Inclusive systems or processes. Because nobody thinks that way. Nobody thinks that way. And if you can switch people's minds, now they're going to listen to you and you become a valued partner rather than a vendor supplying options. If you get them thinking a different way, that's going to make a huge difference. But you have to find that one person. You have to find your one change maker.
So the question is, Richard, how do we find that one change maker? How do we find that individual within the organization who will say, okay?
I'll give you best practices. I'm not going to tell how to do it is obviously going to depend on the person and the situation, but I can give you some best practices. And the best practices that I'm coming across on is typically the CEO, the true C-suite people are going to say, great, talk to this person. Go straight to that person. Don't go, first of all, don't go for the head, the big guys. The big people are usually just going to push that information off. Chief diversity directors are huge. And chief diversity directors, believe it or not, their average starting pay is $150,000 to $170,000, and their average lifespan at a company is 18 months. They either move on or quit in frustration because they haven't been getting the support. If you can get a chief diversity officer involved, I recommend go there. Do not go to the CEOs at first. Go to the chief diversity officer, the chief learning officer. I joined the chief learning officer organization. It's national. I recommend everyone join that. You'll find a lot of people who are interested in making a difference. Go for the people who need the help. Chief diversity officers usually fail, and it's not their fault. They usually fail because they're given a job, they're given a position, and expected to correct 50 years of systemic issues in 12 months. And shockingly, they don't. Typically what I'm experiencing is they're inviting the help. Oh my gosh, that would be great. Can you sit down and give me an hour to help and give me some pointers? And if you can find those people, for me, my best practice is the best opportunity to make a difference in a company's organization.
Great. Thank you. And we just had the head of diversity, inclusion, and belonging at Reddit just joined our board. She's been very, very supportive. And I know through her network, I think we'll be able to reach out to a lot of other folks. So yeah, I thought too, the diversity officer, like I read the statistics as well, that a lot of times they get a little frustrated because they have a great mandate, but like you said, you can't be a miracle worker within a year.
Yeah.
I wanted to throw in addition to what Richard was saying, and I agree entirely on the CEO and of course, ask the diversity officer if there is one, but also the administrative staff. I think the administrative staff is really a good indicator. They have an eye out for those who may be overlooked. And a lot of times those people that care just a whole lot about the organization itself are not the ones that have the titles because they maybe possibly do not care about having such. So I would talk to whoever the administration is in the organization, whether it be the secretary or the paralegals, whatever the organization is. Even people walking around, like the security person who's been there maybe for 20 years. Those are the kind of people I've found to be the most helpful in giving a good analysis on who the true change makers of the organization are.
Yeah, that's a good one, Amanda.
Hey, Elena, this is Gary speaking. Hey, everyone. So great to be with you all. Obviously, I see we jumped into the DEI conversation like a week early, which is awesome, right? So I'm like, this is great, right? I love to hear everything that was coming back from it, right? Like there are a lot of really good offerings here and a lot of good abilities to kind of transform these companies into something newer and better, right? That conventional business model just no longer works. There's a refusal at the part of these especially these younger generations that are coming up. There is a refusal to continue to tolerate those same things that we tolerated, as the older generations coming through. So there is an era of accountability that we're talking about here, and this is why these conversations are relevant. So it's like any other problem, right? We can certainly put on some back-end band-aids to it and kind of start to fix things slowly and stop bleeding and kind of fix things at the top. We certainly need cultural transformation without a doubt, and that's what we're talking about here. And that's, working top end down. And bottom end up, you also have to be working grassroots and with these younger generations to really teach them what that looks like coming forward. So they're making all the right steps moving forward. We're correcting some of the problems at the top, and slowly the convergence of those two dynamics slowly start to change the conversation, right? And ultimately that's what we're talking about here. So we're gonna dive into a bunch more of that, our next conversation, obviously. But I love the acknowledgement that all of these things are starting to happen, and we're starting to find more and more ways to make them more effective. For me, I do a lot of work in the political space here in New York, right? So I spend a lot of time with grassroots organizations, a lot of times with these boots on the ground, right? People who are applying the pressure, who are having the conversations. We're writing the legislation. We're finding the sponsors. We're changing the narrative. We are starting to define ourselves differently. And as such, we're able to engage those people in charge, right? Our elected officials at a whole nother level, because we're involved at that point and we're educating them, which then they're able to educate others. And that's the same thing we're seeing in the DEI space, right? The more we educate from the bottom up, the more we start to see some change. And ultimately, businesses are starting to recognize, without a doubt, right? If they do not respond to their consumer, and their consumer is demanding change, right, and accountability, if they do not respond, they are going to find themselves by the wayside. And that train will leave the station, and they will just find themselves watching it go by. And that's why a lot of individuals, they're paying lip service now because they know they got to do something. They're making incremental change because they know they got to do something. But these companies are looking for legitimate ways for them to solve this problem, and not just save face, but kind of create the demand that their customers are, right? That they're demanding from them. So we're seeing that. We just have to continue to apply pressure. And this is where I guess all of our change starts to happen, right? Just the applied pressure over time. That's when we start to see the dominoes start to fall. And we're already seeing them, thankfully. And we'll continue to apply pressure in our own magnificent, amazing ways and continue to make that happen, right? So I just wanted to jump in real quick, say hi to everybody, and love the conversation, the way it's going. Love to engage with anybody at that point who is interested in furthering that conversation also.
Yeah, so thanks, Gary. Thanks so much for that. So Gary will be with us at the next event. He does have his book. It's called Unjustified: Where Have Our Black Leaders Gone? That's on Amazon. That you can look at it in advance of the discussion. Yeah, but it's an important discussion to have. Like, even with me working with Catalyst 2030, it's a discussion that we continuously struggle with, and we're actually looking at setting up a task force just to deal with the issue of DEI. So yeah, but definitely we can have more discussion next week. In 2 weeks' time. So I want to be respectful of everyone's time, and I want to kind of wrap this discussion up. I want to say thank you everyone for being here and for the conversation. But let me just show you where we are next for the next session. Yeah, it's going to be July 12th at the same time, right? And then getting real about diversity, equity, and inclusion. If you want to know more about us, the website is here. We're still working on the website, so bear with us. But there is information on the website about us. And yeah, and we welcome any if you want to reach out and connect. I would love to hear from you. So I'm just going to put my calendar here if you're interested in what we're trying to do. And of course, in 2 weeks' time, we can talk more about the topic that I think fired everyone up. So yeah, and so I'm going to stop the meeting, and then we can connect with, and all of us are. I mean, I think I invited everyone through LinkedIn, except maybe Leanne. Leanne, did you get the link from Barbara?
Yes, I got it from Barbara.
Yeah. So I have your email. I took your email down. So I'm going to put this into a video and I'll send it to you.
Right.
And I think Gary's on LinkedIn as well. Gary. Okay. Bye, Barbara. So good to see you. But we will get connected one way or another. Okay. So have a good afternoon, everyone, and we'll see each other in 2 weeks' time.
Thanks, Alina.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.
Okay.
Hey,
Bye.
Bye, Lena.